Elias Vance sat in his glass-walled office on the 32nd floor, staring at the live dashboard that pulsed across three monitors. Normally the room hummed. Slack pings, analyst queries, the low murmur of engineers debating thresholds and data weights. Today there was nothing. No interruptions, no requests, just distance. He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing as he watched the predictive routing model adjust in real time. Millions of data points shifting like a living organism. Delivery times recalibrated. Cost curves flattened. Demand surges preemptively rerouted. The system was working perfectly, it always did. He had built it that way. Not just code, never just code. The architecture beneath it was layered, modular, adaptive. A hybrid model of proprietary heuristics and machine learning pipelines that learned faster than anything on the market. But more importantly, it was protected. Every core function, every optimization pathway, every decision tree, mapped, documented, and legally anchored. No one understood that part. No one except Elias. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Elias? It was Marin from legal, her voice unusually tight. She didn't wait for an answer before stepping in. Did you see the 11 hours meeting? I saw it, he replied calm. No agenda. She hesitated, then closed the door behind her. It's not a standard review. He turned slightly, giving her his full attention now. What is it? Marin exhaled. Executive restructuring, that's all I could get confirmed. Elias didn't react immediately. Instead, he turned back to the screen, watching a minor anomaly correct itself in the system's feedback loop. Restructuring doesn't usually involve legal sitting in, he said quietly. No, she admitted. It doesn't. Silence settled between them again, heavier this time. Elias finally stood, smoothing the sleeve of his charcoal jacket. Then let's not speculate. We'll hear it in the room. But as they walked down the corridor together, past teams that suddenly avoided eye contact, past conversations that died mid-sentence, he already knew. This wasn't restructuring, this was removal. The boardroom was too bright. Natural light poured in through the panoramic windows, reflecting sharply off the polished table. Every seat was filled except one, Elias's. At the head of the table sat Daniel Hargrove, CEO, founder, visionary, according to every press release. And today, something else entirely. Elias, Daniel said as he entered, smiling with a warmth that didn't reach his eyes. Right on time. Elias took his seat slowly, scanning the room. CFO, two board members, HR, legal, internal, and external. And then her, Vanessa Hargrove, Daniel's younger sister. She sat 2 seats to his right, posture rigid, a tablet clutched in her hands like a prop she didn't quite know how to use. Elias's gaze lingered for half a second longer than necessary. Then he looked back at Daniel. What's this about? Daniel leaned forward, folding his hands. We're making a strategic shift in leadership. Elias said nothing. We've reached a stage where the company needs a different kind of operational direction. More scalable. More aligned with our long-term vision. Aligned, Elias repeated, almost absently. Daniel nodded. Exactly. And after careful consideration, we've decided to appoint a new head of systems strategy. Elias already knew the name before it was spoken. Vanessa will be stepping into the role, effective immediately. There it was. Clean, simple. Surgical? Around the table, no one moved. Elias turned his head, looking directly at Vanessa. She avoided his gaze for a fraction of a second before forcing a tight smile. You built something incredible, she said, her voice rehearsed. I'm excited to take it to the next level. Elias studied her, not with anger, not with disbelief, but with quiet calculation. You've reviewed the system architecture? He asked. She hesitated. Just slightly. I've been briefed. By who? Daniel cut in. That's not relevant. It is, Elias replied, still calm, because the system isn't modular in the way you think it is. You don't just step into it. Daniel's smile thinned. We've brought in consultants. Top tier. They've assured us the transition will be smooth. Elias nodded slowly. Consultants. Of course. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands now. And my role? A pause. Then HR spoke. Your position is being terminated, effective today. You'll receive a severance package consistent with your contract. Which contract? Elias asked quietly. The question seemed to land harder than expected. Marin shifted slightly in her seat. Daniel frowned. Your employment contract, obviously. Elias's eyes didn't leave his. Not the other one? A flicker of confusion crossed Daniel's face. Elias? Marin started but stopped herself. Elias stood. No sudden movements, no raised voice. Just a deliberate, controlled motion. I'll need copies of all termination documents, he said, and confirmation of who will be assuming operational control of the system. Daniel exhaled, irritation creeping in. Vanessa will oversee it, as we said. Elias nodded once. Understood. He gathered nothing. No laptop, no papers, just himself. As he reached the door, he paused briefly. One more thing, he said, without turning around. Daniel didn't respond. Elias's voice remained even. The system you're taking over, now he turned, isn't just code. A beat of silence, then he walked out. Back in his empty office, Elias sat down one last time. The dashboard still pulsed. Perfect. Untouched. He opened a secure folder buried 3 layers deep. Inside it, a single document. Utility patent filing, pending approval timestamped. Watermarked. Legally binding in ways Daniel clearly didn't understand. Elias allowed himself the smallest exhale. No anger, no panic, just clarity. They hadn't just fired him. They had stepped into something they didn't own, and they were about to find out exactly what that meant. The elevator doors closed with a muted chime, sealing Elias inside a mirrored box that reflected him from every angle. 32 floors down. Each second felt deliberate, measured, not in time, but in consequence. He didn't check his phone, didn't rush, didn't react, because reaction implied surprise. And Elias Vance was not surprised. By the time he stepped out into the street, the city's noise rushed back in. Horns, voices, the distant hum of traffic. But it felt distant, almost irrelevant. His mind was already elsewhere. 3 blocks away, tucked between a private equity office and a discreet legal firm, was a building most people walked past without noticing. No signage, no branding, just tinted glass and a biometric entry panel. Elias entered a code. The door clicked open. Inside, the air was cooler, quieter, intentional. Mr. Vance, the receptionist said, already standing. They're expecting you. Of course they were. He walked straight through to the conference room. Marin was already there. So was David Kessler, external counsel, intellectual property specialist, and one of the few attorneys in the country who understood exactly what Elias had built. Not just technically, but legally. David didn't stand when Elias entered. He simply slid a folder across the table. Tell me they actually did it, he said. Elias took a seat. They terminated me. Effective immediately. Transferred system control to Vanessa Hargrove. David let out a slow breath, leaning back in his chair. Unbelievable. No, Elias corrected calmly. Predictable. Marin crossed her arms. They think the system belongs to the company. It was developed internally, under your employment. Elias opened the folder. Inside, the document sat exactly where it should. Untouched. They're not entirely wrong, he said. Parts of it were developed internally. David raised an eyebrow. But not the core. Elias shook his head slightly. The core architecture, the adaptive optimization engine, was filed under a separate entity. 6 months before full deployment. Marin nodded. Privately held, not assigned to the company. And governed by a licensing agreement, David added, already anticipating where this was going. Elias turned a page. There it was. Clause 7.3, Revocation rights upon material breach. He tapped it once, lightly. They signed it, he said. Marin frowned. They never read it. They skimmed it, Elias corrected. They assumed it was standard IP assignment language. David gave a short, humorless laugh. It's not. No, Elias agreed. It's not. The room fell into a focused silence as they reviewed the structure again, methodically, like engineers inspecting a fault line before controlled demolition. The system, what the company branded as Helios, was not a single piece of software. It was a layered framework. The interface? Company-owned. The data pipelines? Company-owned. But the decision engine, the predictive algorithm that made everything work, that belonged to Elias. Or more precisely, to a holding entity he had established quietly, long before Daniel ever understood its value. David closed the folder. So, he said, leaning forward, they just removed the license holder and continued using the license system. Yes. And reassigned operational control to someone with no contractual standing. Yes. David nodded slowly. That's not just breach, he said. That's willful. Marin's voice was tighter now. Which means we can act immediately. Elias didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. People moved below, unaware. Meetings were happening, deals were closing, systems were running. Including one. A system that was now operating in violation of its own legal foundation. They're preparing for the Series D, Marin said quietly behind him. 400 million valuation. Investor presentation is in 3 days. Elias nodded. I know. David leaned back again, considering. Timing matters here. If we move now, we disrupt operations. But if we wait... We don't wait, Elias said. Not sharply, just definitively. He turned back to them. There's no benefit in delay. The breach has already occurred. Marin tilted her head slightly. You want to trigger it immediately. Yes. David studied him for a moment. No warning? Ted. Every word chosen for maximum clarity and maximum impact. Marin reviewed the final draft, pen in hand, making a single correction before signing off. David followed. Then he slid the document across to Elias. Once this is delivered, he said, there's no ambiguity. They lose legal access to the system immediately. Elias picked up the pen. For a brief moment, his reflection caught in the polished surface of the table. Calm, focused, unmoved. He signed. Across the city, in a glass tower filled with anticipation, Daniel Hargrove stood at the center of a different room. Investors dialed in remotely. Slides flickered across a massive screen. Revenue projections, growth curves, and at the center of it all, Helios. Our proprietary Asai Elias met his gaze. No warning. The printer in the corner of the room hummed to life. Page after page slid out, precise, structured, devastating. Notice of material breach, immediate revocation of licensing rights. Cease and desist unauthorized use of proprietary system. Every line carefully construstum, Daniel said confidently, gesturing toward the data. This is what sets us apart. It's not just optimization, it's prediction. Vanessa sat beside him, nodding at the appropriate moments, her tablet open but untouched. We've built something no one else in the market can replicate, Daniel continued. The room was with him, interested, engaged, until a soft knock at the door. Daniel paused, irritation flashing briefly. His assistant stepped in, holding a sealed envelope. This just arrived, she said quietly. Marked urgent. Daniel frowned. Now? She hesitated. Legal courier. That was enough. He took the envelope, turned it over. No sender name, just a firm stamp. He broke the seal and began to read. The shift was immediate, subtle at first, a slight tightening around his eyes, a pause between breaths. Then, stillness. The room noticed. Daniel? One of the investors prompted. He didn't answer. Didn't look up. He turned to the second page. Then the third. Vanessa leaned closer, whispering, What is it? He handed her the document. She scanned it. And whatever composure she had practiced, cracked. Back in the quiet conference room, Elias stood as the courier confirmation came through. Delivered, received, acknowledged. Marin exhaled slowly. It's done. David closed his notebook. They'll try to challenge it. Of course they will, Elias said. He picked up his coat. But they won't be able to use it. A beat of silence, then... What happens next? Marin asked. Elias paused at the door, not turning this time. They keep running the system, he said. And every second they do... A slight pause. Measured, controlled. They make it worse. The first failure didn't look like a failure. It looked like a delay. Inside Helios, a single routing decision took 0.8 seconds longer than usual. No alert triggered, no red flags. Just a minor hesitation in a system designed to operate at near instant speed. Vanessa didn't notice. Why would she? To her, the dashboard still looked flawless. Clean graphs, stable outputs, predictive curves flowing exactly as the consultants had assured her they would. Latency within acceptable range, one of them said, standing behind her with a tablet. We're seeing minor fluctuations, but nothing outside tolerance. Vanessa nodded, gripping the edge of the conference table a little tighter than necessary. Good, she said. We have another investor session in 2 hours. I want everything stable. It is stable, the consultant replied. He believed that, which made it worse. 3 floors below, in the operations center, the tone was different. Why did Zone 14 reroute twice? One analyst asked, eyes locked on his screen. Another leaned over. It shouldn't have. Demand didn't spike. It thinks it did, the first replied. A third voice cut in. Check the predictive layer. Something's off in the weighting. They pulled up the data. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The system wasn't breaking. It was misjudging. Subtly, quietly. And no one there understood why. Across the city, Elias watched it unfold. Not in real time. He didn't need to. He understood the architecture well enough to predict the pattern. Phase 1 degradation, he said, almost to himself. Marin sat across from him, reviewing incoming reports. They haven't shut it down. They won't, Elias replied. They can't. It's too embedded. David looked up from his laptop. We've already received a response from their legal team. Elias raised an eyebrow slightly. That was fast. They're contesting the breach, David said, claiming the system falls under work-for-hire doctrine. Standard argument. And the license. They're arguing it's non-essential. Elias almost smiled. Non-essential, he repeated. Marin shook her head. They still don't understand what they're dealing with. No, Elias agreed. They don't. He stood walking slowly to the whiteboard at the far end of the room. With a marker, he drew 3 layers. Top layer, interface, middle layer, data processing, bottom layer, decision engine. The system they see, he said, tapping the top layer, is intact. He moved down. The system they think they understand, still functioning. Then he tapped the bottom layer. The system they actually rely on? He drew a thin line through it, Legally disconnected. Back at the company, the second failure arrived. This one couldn't be ignored. A major logistics partner flagged a discrepancy. Delivery windows off by nearly 18%. That's not possible, Vanessa said sharply, pacing behind the operations team. Run the recalibration. We did, an analyst replied. 3 times. And? And it keeps correcting to the same incorrect value. Vanessa stopped. What do you mean incorrect? The analyst hesitated. It's internally consistent. The system believes it's right. A silence fell over the room. Vanessa turned to the lead consultant. Fix it. He adjusted his glasses, already typing. We're isolating the model weights now. How long? A few hours, maybe less. That's not acceptable, she snapped. We have live contracts depending on this. He didn't respond, because for the first time, he wasn't sure he could fix it. Daniel's office was darker than usual, blinds half drawn. The notice of material breach sat open on his desk, pages slightly crumpled from being handled too many times. Tell me this is contained, he said. Across from him, the company's general counsel didn't answer immediately. We're reviewing our options, she said carefully. That's not what I asked. No, she admitted. It's not contained. Daniel stood abruptly pacing. He can't just shut down the system, he said. We own it. She chose her next words with precision. We own parts of it. Daniel stopped. That's not what our contracts say. She met his gaze. It depends on which contract you're referring to. The room went still. Back in operations, the third failure hit, and this one was visible. Delivery routes began looping, not infinitely, but inefficiently. Drivers reported back. System sending me in circles. ETA keeps changing. I've recalculated 3 times, nothing stabilizing. The dashboard still looked calm, but reality no longer matched it. Vanessa stood frozen at the center of the chaos. This doesn't make sense, she said, more to herself than anyone else. The consultant approached her, voice lower now. There's something deeper happening. She turned sharply. Then find it. We're trying, he said, but the core decision logic, it's not behaving like a standard model. What does that mean? He hesitated. Then, it means we don't fully understand it. Across the city, Elias finally opened his laptop, for the first time since signing the notice. He accessed a secure interface, not Helios, something beneath it, a private diagnostic layer. He entered a key. The system responded instantly. Status, active license, revoked unauthorized usage, detected frequency, continuous. Elias studied the metrics, calm as ever. They're still running it, Marin observed. Yes, he said. David leaned forward. At this point, every operation they execute is compounding liability, Elias finished. He closed the laptop. They think this is a technical problem, he said. It's not. Back in the tower, Daniel stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it takes, he said. Get me an answer. Behind him, Vanessa entered, her composure gone. It's spreading, she said. We're seeing inconsistencies across every region. Daniel didn't turn. Then shut it down. She froze. We can't. Now he turned. Why not? Because everything runs on it, she said. If we shut it down, we stop operations entirely. A long silence followed. Daniel looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, he understood. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a bug. This wasn't something you patched. This was structural, and they were already inside it. Across the city, Elias picked up his coat again. Where are you going? Marin asked. He paused briefly. To let them continue, he said, and then he left. The investors didn't leave immediately. At first they stayed, calm, composed, professional, because that was what people did at this level. They didn't panic over fluctuations. They didn't react to noise. They waited for explanations, for reassurance, for control. Daniel Hargrove had built his reputation on providing all three. Today, he had none. "This is temporary," Daniel said, standing at the head of the conference room once again, though the energy had shifted completely. "We're dealing with a technical inconsistency. Our team is already resolving it." Across the table, no one interrupted him, but they weren't convinced. A partner from one of the lead investment firms leaned forward slightly. "We've received reports from 2 logistics partners. Deliveries are off schedule. Routing inefficiencies are compounding." Daniel nodded too quickly. "We're aware." "And your system?" another investor asked. "Helios is still fully operational?" There it was. The question. The one that mattered. Daniel held eye contact. "Yes," he said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Downstairs, the operations floor no longer resembled a controlled environment. It was louder now, faster, tighter. Screens filled with overlapping data streams, contradictions layered over certainty. Zone 22 just recalculated again. That's the 4th time in 10 minutes. It's not stabilizing. Manual override? We tried. The system reasserts control. Vanessa stood in the center, no longer pretending to understand what she was seeing. "Disable the predictive layer," she ordered. The lead engineer shook his head. "We can't isolate it cleanly. It's embedded." "Then force it offline." "That risks corrupting the entire system." Her voice sharpened. "We're already there." He hesitated because she wasn't wrong, but she also wasn't right. In legal, the conversation was colder, more precise, more dangerous. "We need an injunction," Daniel said, pacing again. "He's interfering with company operations." General Counsel didn't look up from the document in front of her. "He's not interfering," she said. Daniel stopped. "He revoked access to a system we depend on. That's interference." "No," she replied evenly. "That's enforcement." Silence. Daniel stared at her. "You're telling me we have no recourse?" "I'm telling you," she said, finally meeting his gaze, "that the contract he's enforcing is valid, and we're currently in violation of it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we argue ownership." "We are," she said, "but ownership of the interface and data infrastructure doesn't extend to the patented decision engine." There it was again. That word. Patented. Daniel exhaled slowly, the realization settling deeper now. He planned this. "Yes," she said. Across the city, Elias sat alone in a quieter room than before. No urgency, no noise, just a single screen displaying aggregated reports. Operational degradation, accelerating unauthorized usage logs, increasing projected financial exposure, compounding. David entered without knocking. "They're preparing an emergency filing," he said. Elias didn't look up. "On what grounds?" "Interference, injunction, temporary relief. Standard pressure tactics." Elias nodded slightly. "They won't get it." "You sound certain." "I am." David stepped closer. "Judges don't like operational disruption at this scale. If they frame it correctly." "They won't," Elias interrupted. Now he looked up. "Because they don't understand the system well enough to explain the disruption without admitting breach." David considered that, and slowly nodded. Back at the tower, the 4th failure arrived. And this one didn't stay contained within dashboards or internal reports. It hit the clients. A major partner, one responsible for nearly 18% of the company's revenue, triggered a contractual alert. Service-level agreement breach penalties began accruing instantly, not projected, not theoretical, real. "Pull the numbers," Vanessa said, her voice no longer steady. An analyst did, and froze. "What?" she snapped. He turned the screen toward her. Penalty accumulation, 2.3 miles, and rising time elapsed, 47 minutes. Vanessa stared at it. This can't be right. It is, he said quietly, and it's not isolated. She looked around. Every screen told the same story. Different regions, same pattern. Upstairs, Daniel's phone buzzed. Once, twice, then continuously. He didn't need to check it to know what it was. Partners, investors, board members, all asking the same question. What's happening? He finally picked it up. The first message he opened was from the lead investor. We're pausing the funding round until further notice. Daniel's grip tightened. $400 million. Frozen. Not gone, but not accessible. Not anymore. In the conference room, the tone shifted again. This time, it wasn't doubt. It was distance. We'll need full disclosure, one investor said. Immediately. Daniel nodded, slower now. Of course. Full system dependencies, legal exposure, contractual liabilities. We'll provide everything. A pause, then, does this situation involve Mr. Vance? Daniel didn't answer right away, because now there was no version of the truth that worked in his favor. Yes, he said finally. Downstairs, Vanessa stood alone for the first time since the chaos began. The room around her still moved. Voices, data, decisions. But none of it felt connected anymore. She looked at the central dashboard, at Helios, still running, still calculating. Still wrong. And for the first time, she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't a system you could take over. It wasn't something you inherited. It wasn't even something you controlled. It was something you depended on. And they had lost the one person who actually understood it. Across the city, Elias closed the final report. Maren watched him carefully. It's accelerating faster than expected, she said. Yes. Are you going to stop it? Elias stood, straightened his jacket, and paused just long enough to consider the question. No, he said. Not cold, not emotional, just exact. They made a decision, he continued. This is the outcome. Maren held his gaze. This will destroy them. Elias didn't respond immediately. Then, they destroyed themselves, he said. Back in the tower, Daniel stood in the same boardroom where it had started. Same table, same chair, but everything else different. The documents were spread out now. Legal notices, penalty reports, investor communications, and at the center of it all, the notice of material breach. He picked it up again, read the line he had skimmed the first time. Immediate revocation of licensing rights upon unauthorized reassignment or termination of the license holder. His eyes lingered on one word, immediate. No grace period, no transition, no recovery window. Just final. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had changed. But inside that tower, everything had. The system didn't crash. That was the part no one outside the company understood. There was no dramatic shutdown, no blackout, no catastrophic failure that could be pointed to, isolated, or blamed on a single moment. Helios kept running. That was the problem. By the following morning, the damage had moved beyond operations. It had become narrative. Industry forums lit up first. Quiet speculation from analysts who tracked logistics performance metrics in real time. Unusual inefficiencies detected across multiple regions. Routing volatility inconsistent with historical models. Then came the trade publications, then the financial press. By mid-afternoon, the company's name was trending, not as an innovator, but as a question. Inside the tower, the atmosphere had changed from urgency to containment. Crisis teams had been formed overnight. External consultants doubled. Legal had expanded into 2 additional conference rooms, and still, nothing was stabilizing. We need a statement, Vanessa said, standing at the far end of the executive table, her voice hoarse from hours of back-to-back briefings. We can't keep operating without addressing this publicly. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He sat at the head of the table, motionless, staring at a report that no longer changed. Because the numbers had stopped surprising him. Loss projections, penalty accruals, contractual exposure. They had reached a point where the exact figures didn't matter anymore. Only the trajectory did, and the trajectory was clear. Down. General Counsel broke the silence. We've reviewed every angle, she said. There's no viable path to challenge the revocation in the short term. Vanessa turned sharply. Short term? We could litigate ownership, she continued, but that would take months, possibly years. We don't have months, Vanessa said. No, Counsel agreed. You don't. A heavy silence followed. Then Daniel spoke. Quietly. What happens if we stop using it? The question landed harder than any raised voice. Operations answered. We revert to manual and legacy systems, the head of logistics said. Capacity drops by at least 60%. Fulfillment times double, possibly triple. And contracts? Most of them include performance thresholds tied to Helios level efficiency. Daniel nodded slowly. So we breach anyway. Yes. Across the city, Elias sat in the same quiet room, reviewing a different set of numbers. Not theirs. His. Projected licensing valuations. Acquisition interest. Inbound inquiries, carefully filtered, quietly persistent. David entered again, this time without urgency. They're preparing to shut it down, he said. Elias didn't look surprised. They've reached the threshold, he replied. Investor pressure? David asked. And contractual collapse, Elias said. It's the only logical move left. Marin, standing by the window, turned. What happens when they do? Elias closed the file. They confirmed the system was essential. David nodded once. Which strengthens your position? Yes. A pause. Then Marin asked the question that had been sitting beneath everything. Is this what you wanted? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, mirroring a position Daniel had taken so many times before. The city moved below, unchanged, unaware. This was never about them, he said finally. Marin frowned slightly. Then what was it about? Elias turned back. Control, he said. Not power, not revenge. Control. They assumed ownership without understanding dependency, he continued. They treated the system like an asset. It isn't. David watched him carefully. Then what is it? Elias's expression didn't change. It's leverage. Back in the tower, the final decision came without ceremony. No announcement, no meeting, just a directive. Helios. Full shutdown initiated. The command moved through the system like a quiet ripple. Processes terminated. Predictive models halted. Decision loops severed. For the first time since its deployment, silence. The effect was immediate. Operations slowed to a crawl. Manual overrides flooded in. Delays compounded instantly, not subtly now, but visibly, undeniably. Clients didn't wait, they acted. Termination notices began arriving within the hour. Penalty clauses triggered automatically, and the funding round didn't just pause, it dissolved. Daniel stood alone in his office when the final report arrived. Not a projection, not a model, a summary. Total financial exposure, $412 million. He read it once, then again, not because he didn't understand it, but because he did. Every decision, every shortcut, every assumption, all of it, accounted for. A soft knock at the door. He didn't respond. It opened anyway. Vanessa stepped in. For the first time since this began, she didn't try to appear composed. It's over, she said. Daniel didn't turn. Yes, he replied. A pause, then, "What do we do now?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Simple. And impossibly late. Daniel finally looked at her, and for the first time there was no authority in his expression. No control. Just clarity. "We respond," he said. 3 days later, the press release went out. Carefully worded, legally vetted, strategically framed. Company announces strategic restructuring. Following system transition challenges. No mention of breach, no mention of revocation, no mention of Elias. But the market didn't need it spelled out. The numbers told the story. Across the city, Elias signed a different document. Not a notice, not a warning, an agreement. Licensing, new partners, new terms. This time, fully understood. David reviewed the final page before sliding it across. "Better protections," he said. "Yes," Elias replied. "Better positioning." "Yes." David studied him for a moment. "You could have sold it back to them," he said. "Before it got this far." Elias capped his pen. "I know." "Why didn't you?" A brief silence, then, "Because they wouldn't have learned anything," Elias said. Later that evening, Elias walked through the city without destination. No urgency, no tension, just movement. The kind that came after something ended. Not abruptly, but completely. His phone buzzed once. A message. From an unknown number. He opened it. Just one line. "You made your point." No name, no signature. But he knew who it was. Elias looked at the screen for a moment. Then locked it. And kept walking. There was no celebration. No satisfaction in the conventional sense. Because this had never been about winning. It had been about precision. Understanding the system, understanding the rules, and knowing exactly when to enforce them. Somewhere behind him, a company recalibrated, scaled down, restructured, survived perhaps, but not as it had been. Not at 400 million. Not even close. Ahead of him, something else waited. Not revenge, not recovery, something quieter, more deliberate. Built the same way everything he created was built. Layer by layer, with intent, with clarity, and with one fundamental principle that no one who had crossed him would ever forget. Ownership wasn't what you claimed. It was what you could prove.